Welcome, everybody. We may as well make a bit of a start. So, to introduce myself, I'm Jason Foster. I'm one of the Associate Directors here at the Technology Advisory Practice here at BDO. And I'm currently leading the knowledge management area as well. For some housekeeping, if you've got a weak internet connection, you can use your phone. The presentation slides they're loaded up into the handouts pane, so you can click through them at your leisure. Any questions, if you submit them as we go, we'll see how we go in terms of answering them on the fly. We might sort of hold some off towards the end as well, but if we don't get through all of the questions in the time frame we've got allocated, we'll make sure that we get back to everybody afterwards. If you've got any technical difficulties, there's a link there, supportgoto.com webinar to help out. And after the session, we'll send out all the slides, send through a link, and we'll also touch base just in case there's any questions that you might have cropped up in the time frame since we go through this stuff today. So why are we doing this webinar? I suppose with the current work from home phenomenon that we're all experiencing with the COVID-19 situation, clients have been coming to us with some common themes. It's around a lot of the information and knowledge that they're capturing and having troubles with, and we've gone through a lot of talk to them around the issues they're having and some of some ways to solve things. And hence we've come up with this webinar to sort of address some of these issues. So what we'll go through is sort of what we've seen from that current state of play, what knowledge management actually is. We'll go through some of the benefits of knowledge management as well, and we'll also paint a bit of a framework so that you can actually adopt and apply some of the learnings that we'll go through later or in this session to your current situation. Importantly, we'll go through some of the tips and tricks. So we'll go through some of the immediate things you can currently do to help yourselves out at the moment that will make an immediate impact from what we've seen of some of the discussions we've had with clients as well. And interestingly, we'll go through some of the innovations that can come later down the track when we start to talk around knowledge management. We also promise we won't say the terms a new way of working or a new normal, because we've probably heard a fair bit about that in the past. So we'll steer clear of that. So from what we've seen, so COVID-19 has triggered just a wave of people working from home, as you're probably sitting at home right now watching this webinar. And as a result, there's been a significant amount of collaboration tools that have been rolled out and adopted pretty much out of necessity. And this is likely to be a new way of working for a lot of people. And we've seen sort of technologies such as there might be like your Google Suites or your Microsoft Teams and SharePoints. And some organizations may have had this already set up, ready to go, and some it might have been a bit of a step and a bit of a leap to set these things up. So we've sort of seen from places we've spoken to, there's been some clients who've rolled out a few instances of this to somewhere like SA Health, who rolled out 40,000 instances of MS Teams within the space of a week. So I'm sure we all fit somewhere within there. What's actually happening is with this technology, it's not just around like the chatting and the video conferencing and video meetings, it also comes with a lot of document storage and document management capability as well. And again, this might be a bit different for the way some people have previously worked. And what's basically happened is with all of what we've seen is with all of the people being scattered remotely, different ways of capturing information, it's created a significant increase in the information and knowledge that's actually being stored. And as a result, there's clearly some challenges that have occurred. So we're seeing a lot of documents and a lot of information that's being loaded without structure. So this is leading to the question where clients are coming to us and sort of saying, well, we've got all these documents and just information, it's just everywhere. So how do I send this email? Or do I send this information via email? Do I send it via a chat channel? It just seems to be adding all this complexity. So when we sort of start to see a lot of that unstructured information sort of combining like that, we tend to see that it can really increase that complexity. We refer to that as technical debt. So when we move back into the office, having that complexity and that additional information can actually make things more complex. So we want to make sure that's the sort of thing that isn't happening when we all start to move away from that working from home environment back into the office environment. We also see one of the key things from a challenge is that missed opportunity to exploit that knowledge that's being captured. The information is being captured in droves, and so we want to use that to our advantage because there's a lot of different ways you can actually do that, and we'll go through some of them in a moment. So from a knowledge point of view, one of the clients actually spoke to us, and we're actually noticing some people weren't probably geared up for the fact that we don't have those corridor conversations anymore. It's really, a lot of people are finding it difficult with all that knowledge that sits in people's heads, what we call tacit knowledge. We're finding that's a bit harder to capture because we're using the tools, and we might be walking past someone's desk and get a bit of information from them, which we're missing at the moment. So we're actually speaking to a couple of people, and they've actually said they're going to use this time frame now as a bit of a catalyst to actually change the way they work, and capture this knowledge in a more structured manner. So when we look at what benefits exist with knowledge management, if we look at what it really is to start with, we see it as that process of creating, sharing, using, and managing the knowledge that exists within an organization. Like a benefit would be like the process efficiency. So COVID-19 has brought a lot of requirements, and a lot of people are talking to us around reducing costs and increasing efficiencies and doing things smarter, quicker, in a more efficient way. And knowledge management is a real way that you can actually get that to happen. I suppose the point here around leveraging the combined knowledge that exists in your organization, I think the key word here is combined. You've got all this information and all the brain power that exists within your company and your organization, and to be able to capture all of that and all the information that people know, plus all their past experiences as well, and combining that together is a really strong advantage that you can then use as a competitive advantage over others in your industry as well. Once you've got it there, you can actually build on that knowledge. So you can start to get a really broad and deep knowledge set. One of the key things also is the focus on the value-added activities. So you can actually spend more time on the value-added activities and spend time on the message that you're trying to create. So rather than actually trying to find information, if you're, say, with a law firm or an engineering firm or something like that, you can actually spend more time creating the message for your clients. So from a law firm's point of view, you can actually spend more time on creating that legal argument or that legal message you're getting across, rather than trying to find information. You can avoid, knowledge management will avoid recreating information that's already there. So a lot of times we're probably thinking, you've probably been working and you've gone, I know this has been created before, or I know someone else has done this, but I just can't find it. Yet I'm going to have to recreate it. And likewise, when we're trying to find things faster, having that knowledge available to find things faster can be a really good way to get things working faster, and making sure that you're spending more time on those value-adding activities. And by having all that information together, combined and collated and structured appropriately, you can then inform decisions a lot better. So you can make decisions based on a lot more information, that's a lot more deep, and come up with things that way. One of the things we're also finding is that protection of how knowledge can actually leave your organization. So places that have an aging workforce, or we know that key people might be about to leave, we find that once people leave that organization, it can impact in one of two ways. So generally you'll either lose that knowledge that leaves your organization, or it'll come at a bit of a cost. So you'll have to get these people back in as generally consultants, who'll probably charge a lot more to get that expertise that you could have captured whilst they were still around. With that process efficiency, we're finding with COVID-19, with examples around that, is that a lot of places seem to be standing people down and cutting costs and reducing hours and making people work more for less pay and all these sorts of things. But we think that's missing. There are some other advantages if you capture that knowledge of actually driving efficiencies and doing things in a better way, where you might be able to pull back on some of the pain that's happening in those sorts of areas. As with everything, technology underpins everything. We're very clear here to say it's not the solution around knowledge management. It's just an enabler. But basically, a technology will enable that system to enable people to share and access and update that information. So this can be via things like you would have seen from Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, might be a Google Drive. There might be some workflow applications. There's basically a lot of knowledge management applications out there that can be actually used, but you're probably, I dare say, probably using one of those that we just mentioned there. It can actually, the technology is there to structure that information, turn it from unstructured information and organizing it properly. So basically pulling that information and that knowledge into the one place and organizing it properly so that you can then access it properly and get what you need from it. So that's probably the documented side of knowledge management, but there's also the undocumented side. And this is where it can become a lot more interesting, where we're starting to talk around like communities of practice, getting information out of people's heads and being able to pool it and combine it and start to discuss it that way. There's also, once you've got that in place, you've got everything in one location, you can actually start to drive some automation. So once the information is there, the automation can be done to reduce repetitive processes. We'll talk a little bit around some IoT and some innovation around some automation that can apply to knowledge management, but that's generally a bit further down the track. And as shown with our slide here, what we've got is we sort of see knowledge management happening in two waves. So there's the current wave that they're all experiencing at the moment, where we've got the cloud document storage. There's more collaboration. There's people starting to work on documents together. So the technology is starting to enable that, so people to work on document at the same time. You've got your chat and collaboration tools, and that's basically enabling a lot more mobility, and people have been able to work from different locations. We see that wave one is well and truly happening. It's just a matter of seeing how people make the most of it is the most important thing around wave one. When we start to talk around wave two, which is starting to occur, and we see a lot of work occurring in this area in the next little while, and some can be quite cost effective once it's up and running, is where we're starting to talk around your artificial intelligence, your automated searching, and your robotic process automation as well. So this is basically getting the tools and the technology it doesn't just take away those mundane, repetitive activities to enable you to focus on the key messages, but it also enables some really good insights to be driven into the knowledge that you actually do have there. So when we're starting to talk around some of the robotics, we can actually start to get information from sensors and Internet of Things, and actually build that knowledge base, not so much from people's heads, but from activities that are happening within the organization as well. So we've seen some places like at mining organizations we've been working with, where it can actually capture information from some of the processing variables and from what people are actually doing at certain times and the outputs and results that are actually happening, and then that can actually start to build or extend upon the existing knowledge base that's within the organization, and that will then make that organization at a competitive edge over others. So that's the background. What we sort of like to go through is some of the key areas that we see as being able to make a difference by implementing some of the aspects we'll go through here. You can actually make a difference immediately with your knowledge management applications at your current work. So we see that there's 6 key areas that need to be in place. These aren't in a particular order, but they sort of do interact with each other. And what we'll do is we'll pick a few of these and go through them in a bit more detail shortly. But essentially, the 6 key areas we see having that strategy alignment. So does the way that you're working with knowledge actually align with your overall business strategy? This is a key question for everything that has a transformational nature to it. So it's not just to do with knowledge management, but it's extremely important to in this field. Likewise, that rolls into the having that senior and executive governance in place. So it needs to be driven from the top. Execs need to understand the benefits of knowledge management, and as similar to with the strategic alignment, if this is more of a transformational capability, so we want to make sure that it's driven from the top and it flows through the entire business and it's made a priority. When we start to look at the culture, so to develop a knowledge culture, that can often be one of the trickiest aspects to put in place, basically because people see knowledge as power, and it can be sometimes difficult to get people to share that knowledge because they see it as giving someone else an edge. So that sort of broadly comes under that entire that culture that an organisation can put in place. So you need to show how to make it worthwhile for people, encourage people to share the knowledge, show what's in it for them, set some KPIs, so you can actually get that culture happening. The three nuts and bolts areas are around the processes, the content ownership, and the technology. So these are the three we'll go through in a little bit in a bit more detail in a moment. But basically, the processes looks at how you do things and what you do, and having a lack of clarity can create a lot of issues. So we're sort of seeing that if organisations haven't got those processes in place, or it's not clear what people should be doing, we're seeing that they are actually creating some of the issues that are occurring at the moment, with people having too much information everywhere that they can't. It's just getting out of control. And the process is also where those rules and policies fall into place as well. The content ownership, you need someone to own and drive it. We'll go through some steps as to how to get that happen in a moment. And the technology. You can use whatever technology you prefer, as we were talking about just before. But the key thing is that it's got to be easy to use, because if the technology is difficult and is hard to use, it'll stop things before they start. So as I was saying, we'll focus in on these three areas highlighted in red here around the processes, the content ownership, and the technology, because we think these are effectively what we might call from what we've been speaking to clients about, these tend to be the low-hanging fruit of things that they can actually put in place now to make a bit of a difference. So if we pick off the process fruit from the tree to start with, we see that adopting the right processes it'll enable you to capture and enable that ongoing improvement of knowledge. So you want your process to be repeatable. You need them to be clear. You need them to be clear to you need it to be clear from what people are actually doing and how they're doing it. So that's one of the most important things. One of the next things is to get so that you can gain some traction from the key processes. So select some processes that are causing problems, that might be causing efficiencies. Get some traction around some processes, pick the key ones that are causing some problems and creating inefficiencies, or those that you actually know will actually create some value to start with. And a way that you might be able to do this is you can select the top three things. So there might be some, for instance, we've been speaking to someone recently and they're saying there's always this information that we're searching for over and over again, and we'd be suggesting, well, there's probably a key process to start with. When we're starting to look at three key processes to look at, it's generally not too hard to get people to tell you what they have problems with or what they don't like. So that could be a way to identify the top processes to look at. Make it easy to store and retrieve information. Once you've got a process in place that the information is easy to store and it's logical, it can become a bit self-serving, and it'll encourage people to actually use it. So it's important to make sure that's easy to use as well. Measurements with the processes. One of the key things with the processes is making sure that, as we were saying earlier, that you get the business executive buy-in. If you can actually measure your results and track the benefits that you're actually creating, that's a good way to get some executive buy-in as well. You actually see some improvements, and that's a good way to start with as well. So, and the problem with knowledge management can be a little bit difficult at times to actually measure results, but finding those processes that you can actually measure results is a good way to go. You want it to be simple. So to make it simple, there are some key principles you can actually apply. So there's a number of principles that you might want to do around your processes and classifying information, but we've selected a few here to sort of go through. So that's around like organizing and structuring. So from an organizational point of view, make sure that whatever information you're loading up, your naming conventions are in place and they're consistent. From a structure, make sure your structure is clear. So we're seeing a lot of problems. This is occurring at the moment with the structure of information. So there's structures can make things quite confusing. If they don't have structures, people will be loading information in all sorts of different areas, which we're seeing causing a bit of a problem. Storage, think about how long you want to store information for, archiving policies, and more importantly, we think the distribution principle is quite an important one as well, because once we're starting to, this is around how we actually share the information. So have rules around how you might want to share documents. So do you share it via a link? Do you share it via one of the chat channels? Do you share it directly via a SharePoint page or whatever? And just be clear on these, because we're speaking to someone the other day, and they've I think over a 2-day period, they said they'd received information in 5 or 6 different ways. So they didn't know how the information was coming. They didn't know where it was getting stored, and then if they wanted to find something again, they just couldn't find it to save themselves. So that's really important to have some really clear rules around the processes and some policies around how you share information. So if you want to do something around the processes point of view to make an immediate impact, what we can do is, as we're saying, select the processes of the highest value. Select those that are causing pain, that it might be running a bit slowly, or ones, importantly, as we're saying before, that you can actually measure the improvements. Define that structure, get that structure up and running, make it clear to everybody, and do what's logical for you. So you might have been using a network drive leading up to the work from home, as an example, and you might have been using that for a fairly long period of time. And as you've been doing that, I would expect, as a lot of places would have, there's things you like and you don't like, but you've just been putting up with it. So you can use this opportunity as a chance to rethink how you structure the information that actually works better for you, because it might have been set up by someone who's left. It might have been in place for 10 years, and it might be just be the case of this is how we've always done things. So yeah, this is a perfect opportunity to rethink how you're structuring that information. As we're saying, some of the key rules that you might want to be looking at is sort of what should be loaded and where should be loaded. So there's some of the key things around processes that you might want to think about. From an ownership point of view, this can often be where knowledge management falls down, because it does need someone to really own it. It does need someone to drive it. So this isn't talking around that executive level. This is talking about someone who just wants to own the knowledge management and drive it from it. So they'll own the solution, they'll own the processes, and just that level down from that executive, just really operationalizing that knowledge management. We find that, we sort of find that processes can get you some part of the way, but having that ownership is that next level, because the processes, if they haven't got someone to drive it, tend to fall off, and people tend to go back to the original way of working. We see that having that single point of responsibility is really important. One of the keys and the whole goals around knowledge management is that you want to break down silos, and by having multiple people in charge of your knowledge management and your repositories, can actually build more silos. So what we want to see is someone sitting across the top who runs the whole thing, who breaks down those silos. So we're looking at things that might be able to make an immediate difference, things like setting up the governance, make it clear who's doing what, who's required to own the content, understand the business users who might be using the content and might be owning some of the information, so involve them early. Allocate time for the ownership. If it's not taken seriously and people aren't allocated time for it, it just won't happen. So we think this is something which is often overlooked, is we might be setting up a knowledge management repository or knowledge management capability, but we're not actually giving it the attention it deserves by saying, look, here's someone to look after it, and here's some actual time that they've got per week to allocate to it. And the other thing on top of that as well is have some clear dates. So it's all very well to have someone allocated some time to it, but it actually works a lot better if you've got some clear dates set, and you can actually put a stake in the ground and say, look, by whatever date, we're going to have X, Y, and Z rolled out, and then you can move on from there. So we find that quite important as well. And creating those short, clear training guides, just in making sure people can understand things, because for some organisations it might be a slightly different way of working, but you can, developing some short guides and some quick reference guides can be the way to go. So, as I was saying before, technology does play a pretty important role. Um, and we're clear to say, again, it's not the solution, it's just an enabler that sits underneath everything in business today. So some of the key areas we're currently looking at is that there's a number of different things around technology that you might want to consider, but some of the three key things that do seem to be cropping up a little bit in discussions we've been having relate to, say, like security. This is pretty key for technology that's rolled out to everyone throughout an organization, and particularly important for those that are working from home. That ease of use. So just make sure you understand how people want to use it, get the right use cases, get the right case studies in place, select the right processes to use, and then make it as easy as possible. Because if the technology is, as I was saying before, if the technology is not easy to use, it won't get used and it'll defeat the whole purpose. So you can set up whatever else you want around it, but if the technology is clunky and hard to use, it's not going to be adopted. And test it with teams as well. So, and with and integration. So you want it to integrate with other solutions, because if it's hard, it won't get used. And you need it to sit seamlessly within all your other the systems that exist as well, and within your broader business processes as well. So having security, ease of use, and integrating it appropriately are all really important aspects around technology, amongst all the other usual things that happen with technology projects. So to make an immediate difference with the technology perspective, speaking around projects, we'd suggest conducting it as a project. Treat it with the respect it deserves. Knowledge management is often something that's cast off to the side, and when something else happens, it's often, it falls down in the list of priorities. But treating this if it's a transformational project, it's really important. So get the right stakeholders involved, make sure the right requirements are in place, set some timelines up, use whatever methodology you want. You might want to, this probably leads itself to releasing things in more an agile manner, because people want to touch and feel it and get used to it and improve things as they go. So we'd probably suggest that as well. Test things out with people, and get those integration, and just make sure that it's working in little increments. That's pretty important. Go beyond your document storage. So we'd suggest also testing those boundaries, like setting up, you can set up repositories just to capture documents, but we also suggest that next level, which is when we're starting to look at like communities of practice, wikis, different ways of actually building knowledge by using the technology. So there's a number of different ways you can actually do, rather go beyond that document storage, and they can also lead to the innovation aspects of technology that we were talking about just before. A setup to when you return to the office, don't change back to what you're originally doing. We'd say if you've set something up over the last few months that's starting to work, or it's showing some signs of having some value, don't go back to your original way of working when you go back to the office, because it can be quite tempting to. Stick it out and keep improving it. It's probably not at the optimum level at the minute, unless you're an organisation that had it all set up ready to go beforehand. But yeah, don't be tempted just to go back to normal, because then you've undone a lot of the good work, and you're missing out on a lot of opportunities that might present themselves. So they're the three key areas that we sort of think you can actually pick some things to happen to do things immediately and make a bit of a difference. But these also, as I was saying earlier, sit within that broader context around making sure that you've got it within your business strategy, get some executive ownership, and set some things in place just to make it that business as usual within your organization as well. So it's just something that happens naturally, because you don't want knowledge management to be something that feels like a burden. You want it to be embedded within your processes, and when you start actually using it properly, the benefits it'll start paying for itself, basically. So in summary, we sort of see that there are a number of strategies that you can probably do over the next little while to make a bit of a change, and that's things like assess where you currently are, identify where the greatest value can be achieved, implement processes and if they're larger sort of processes, we suggest you could do them as a mini project as well. Implement that right level of governance, and just make that technology as easy as possible to use. That you really want to be making that technology as, don't overcook it. Just make sure that you're using what you need to do, and that's the sort of technology, and it's implemented in the right sort of way and tested by users that then that's going to make them want to use it more and more and more. And just consider how it can be enable that seamless transition back to the office. You almost want to be picking up where we are now, and if we are moving all back to the office, that we're still currently working that same sort of way, so that if we do need to implement mobility or get people working remotely, or you can take advantage of those aspects of your business operations as well, that you can just basically pick up a laptop or a computer, whatever it might be, and actually continue to build upon that knowledge and use that knowledge in a mobile manner as well. Measurements. So we'd suggest developing some measurements. If they might be around some process efficiency times, it might be over, there might be some more wins or whatever you might be actually generating as a result of having more knowledge. All that sort of aspects, all those components are really important to build into your strategies as well. And also suggest to help with the knowledge management is, we've worked at places where that's been built into KPIs. So if you save and build upon that knowledge, it's actually built into a formal KPI that's actually discussed at your end of year performance as well. So that you can actually start to build culture that way and make it a bit of an incentive for people to start building knowledge. So what we see is happening next is, once that's all in place, we see the next wave, as we're saying, is you can really start to work with like your chatbots, artificial intelligence, e-discoveries, Internet of Things, just reading information and getting knowledge from sensors, and building knowledge bases that way. So we sort of see that where we're currently at is the tip of the iceberg. We've gone to this new way, or almost set up the new way of working, but effectively it is of being more remote, having that work from home experience, and having to gain that knowledge and build upon that knowledge that way. So we sort of see is that once we've got that and we've nailed that, the next step is actually there's some real significant advantages that can be built from some of the new technologies that are coming up. So that's basically our, I've got a question. So that's basically the stuff we wanted to go through. I'll just read one of the questions here. That's around the knowledge workers. So thanks, Henry, for the question, and wanting to retain the critical knowledge for themselves. Yeah, so it's basically, the question is more around, so does that devalue by people sharing information, does that actually devalue their value in the market effectively? And this is probably where a balance does occur. So we sort of see that when people do, or when they are reluctant to share information and share knowledge, it does obviously have an impact. It can actually have an impact on their value in the market, depending on what it is. But we also see that we've actually spoken to, as we actually provide references for people, so we're finding a lot of questions around why should I hire someone? Do they share information? We've actually had specific questions around that. And we see that that's actually something that is quite important for people to be able to articulate, that they can actually share information, that are willing to work as that broader team. And that's actually resonated quite well with some of the interviews and people we've spoken to. On the flip side, if someone does have a specific niche, we're generally finding that there's so many other types of businesses out there that it doesn't really make that much of a difference in the long term. It depends on what their specific niche is. So it's a bit of a different, like horses for courses, I suppose. But we generally find that people who share knowledge and want to build upon a knowledge base and make it easier and better, drive that competitive advantage of an organisation, they're probably more wanted out in that marketplace anyway, and that probably is more of a value to employers anyway. That's just having a quick look at my little questions list here. I think that's the main things. If there's any, so what we'll do from here is the deck will be sent out to everybody. This recording will be saved, and we'll also touch base just in case you've got any sort of questions that might crop up once you've had a chance to digest some of the things we've gone through. And I appreciate everybody's time on this Tuesday morning, and thank you very much for listening in.